Hi, guys. I'm Courtney,
And I'm Lisa.
and welcome to the next chapter in the Book of the Dead, brought to you by Darkcast Network, indie podcasts with a twist. Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Book of the Dead. With me today, I have a very special guest. Lisa is not with me. She's usually not when I do these interviews, but I have someone just as good here in her place. So today with me, I have Glynn Martin, a retired officer. He is also the executive director of the Los Angeles Police Memorial Foundation. He is a published true crime author and a frequent guest on true crime documentary and docuseries as an expert. So, Glenn, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you. Pleasure to be here as well.
So there's a few things that I want to talk to you about, some things that we went over in our initial call. But before we get into that, tell me about yourself and your career as an officer. Why did you decide to go into law enforcement? How did your career kind of go over the years? What did you work in specifically? That kind of thing.
Well, it's a great place to start. I am, in fact, a retired Los Angeles police officer, and I remain here working for the nonprofit that is the Los Angeles Police Memorial Foundation. It's a great honor to have served the department, and I'm equally honored to be taking care of the foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that supports the families of Los Angeles Police Department that are enduring catastrophic circumstances, such as terrible things like cancer and off-duty car crashes, and unfortunately, our main function is to take care of the families of officers killed in the line of duty. It's a subject that's close to me personally and professionally. One of my police academy classmates, who was also my roommate, was an officer that was shot and killed in 1987. In fact, it was just about 10 days ago that I attended the parole hearing for his killer, and we've successfully denied parole for him for the fifth time here. So that kind of ties together my work with the police department and my work with the foundation. During my career, I had the privilege to work all quarters of the city. The police department is essentially divided up into four different regions. We call them operations bureaus, and I worked in each of those four regions in uniform patrol. I also spent about half my career working undercover plainclothes assignments in Hollywood and North Hollywood. I was a major narcotics detective for about 3 years. I got to do some fascinating work during my career with the Los Angeles Police Department, and continue to do the fascinating work with a level of ongoing care for the LAPD families here in my retirement. So very fortunate to have had this lengthy association with the LAPD, and very pleased to be here to talk about it today.
That's amazing. It sounds like you've had a very distinguished career.
Yep, I'm very fortunate to have done the kind of work that we did in the time that I did it. And I came straight from college onto the police department here. I was really I'd been accepted to law school. I was headed in that direction, and then just I was pretty tired of the academic stuff. So my father was in active service to the Glendale Police Department, a sizable suburb of Los Angeles here, and he provided for us during his career. And I started looking around, and one of my friends contacted me and said, "Hey, I'm going to apply for the LAPD." Well, he wound up doing a career with the fire department, and I wound up doing my career with the LAPD. So we're both very happy with the career paths that we chose. So that was kind of my pathway came on the department directly from USC, and yeah, that's been my USC, and then all these years in and around the Los Angeles Police Department. So it's been a great journey.
That sounds amazing. And I just have to say, thank you for the service that you've provided for your community members in LA and the like, and your fellow officers and the work you do now. It is wonderful to see someone so dedicated to protecting and serving, even after retirement.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I look forward to continuing it for another few years here.
I bet. So tell me about some of the cases you worked. Are there any that have stuck with you through your career? Any that have really kind of taught you something as you've gone on this journey?
Another wonderful question, and this is one of those jobs where literally no 2 days are the same. And that being the case, there seems to be a takeaway from pretty much every day that you work. A little bit different. Certainly, there's some commonality. In terms of the cases that I was personally involved with that are of enduring interest. In 1991, as a major narcotics detective, we made two major cocaine seizures, and those continue to be the largest seizures in the history of the Los Angeles Police Department. In May of '91, we seized 4,600 pounds of cocaine from an unincorporated part of Los Angeles County. It was a case that was spun off from a lengthy undercover investigation, and the case was developed by one of our undercover officers, for which the rest of the squad did support activities like surveillance and search warrants and all kinds of information gathering and identifying organization members and whatnot. Again, that was May of '91, which was an interesting time in the Los Angeles Police Department. This occurred about 2 months. The seizure was about 2 months following the release of the videotaped beating of Rodney King. So it was a trending downward time for the Los Angeles Police Department. It was difficult for the department. I think this was the first positive press that we had in the post Rodney King video time. That being said, the important part was we arrested a bunch of folks. We took 4,600 pounds of cocaine off the street, and we continued to work that case. And then in October of '91, we seized an additional, it was more than 5,000 pounds, a little farther out of town in Fontana, California. So ultimately, we seized about 10,000 pounds of cocaine. If I remember correctly, we had 13 successful federal prosecutions. And when you make cases like that, it takes some time for them to resolve. I think we finally finished up court in 1994, if I remember correctly. So that's the one. And then there's the appeals that come up, and all of them were denied. And because it was a federal case, the kingpin in the May '91 case, he was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. And I think he wound up doing about 22 and a half years in federal prison. He was a Bolivian national. So a lot of work, absolutely fascinating to try and identify all the people that were involved in it. Many forms of investigation were used. All the kilogram packages from the second seizure are 2,298 kilogram packages, and our scientific investigation folks fingerprinted all six sides of each one of those 2,298 packages and successfully tied some folks to handling those particular kilogram packages. So, we kind of rolled out everything on these seizures. The undercover officer spent decades undercover as a major narcotics detective. His accomplishments are truly remarkable, and certainly highlighted by this 10,000-pound seizure of cocaine. And as I mentioned, that record within the LAPD still stands to this day.
That's amazing. It's almost mind-boggling to think of just the sheer amount of it's like the sheer amount of cocaine. Like it's almost mind-boggling. The average person like myself doesn't realize the ins and outs of an investigation like that, or the sheer level of contraband you can seize. It's you hear like the daily, oh, someone got nailed for, a couple of ounces or something like that. So to hear that number is mind-boggling for someone like myself or anyone listening out there. It's like you can't even imagine it. Like I can't even picture what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think to a degree it very illustrative of my point about no 2 days being the same. So my partner and I were the first ones through the door on both of those cases. The first one, the May 1991, was in a residential neighborhood. They referred to them as ranchettes. As much as you can refer to anything in Los Angeles as a ranch, it was a little bit of property behind a house. When we went through the door, the cocaine was stored. It was broken up in several different rooms, and there was some outside the bed of a pickup truck that was garaged. So when you start totaling this stuff up in your head, and you're thinking, wow, this is quite something. And then we move forward to October of '91, and my partner and I went through the door. That was at a used car lot. Went through the door at the wee hours of the morning, 4 or 5 in the morning. And again, we thought we'd seen everything with the May seizure, and we're looking around, and there's even more cocaine at this place than the other one. So every time you think you've seen it all in this job, you wind up seeing something else. And it's equally fascinating to me for the same reasons that you stated. And the fact that you invest months, if not years, in these cases, and you avoid detection by the bad guys, and you wind up taking a bunch of people into custody, literally taking tons of cocaine off the street. There's still a level of wonder that exists with yourself as a police officer or an investigator, or even as a major narcotics detective. It was so that's the big one that's enduring to me. Certainly there's a lot of other stuff that happened, at a lot of murder scenes over the years, and it's a fascinating business when you take a moment to reflect on it.
Absolutely, I'm sure. And I'm sure that was so rewarding to know that you took part in really saving lives. You don't know how many countless lives could have been lost from overdosing or just being involved with these people that were dangerous and transporting and distributing the cocaine. So I can't even imagine how rewarding that would be, just to know that you truly saved so many lives in that moment.
Yeah, it's like I said, very, very fortunate to have done what we did when we did it. A lot of resources have been redeployed within law enforcement. I don't think there's as many personnel resources assigned to major narcotics investigations as there were at that period of time. Part of it has to do with at least the seeming reduction in the flow of cocaine into the United States. But it was a great time to be a major narcotics detective.
I bet. So I guess kind of along those same lines, doing something like that is obviously a risk to your own safety. But tell me about some of the risks involved with being a law enforcement officer that some people may not realize.
I think one of the things to do up front is to recognize a term that is bandied about, particularly when it pertains to officers killed in the line of duty. I've heard it so many times, and it's just so untrue. Well, the officer was on a routine traffic stop, or the officer was performing a routine domestic violence investigation, or the officer was on routine patrol. There is nothing routine about anything that we do, particularly on duty. It's a high risk job. Uniformed officers are the most conspicuous symbol of government, be them, municipal, city police officers, county sheriffs, anybody that wears a uniform, a badge, carries a gun, is a potential target. It's been that way for a lot of years. During the Vietnam era, there was considerable problem with sniping incidents. Bad guys sniping at uniformed officers. It's a fascinating job. There's an aspect of danger to it that is sometimes underreported, sometimes undersold, definitely undertold. And it's a unique undertaking for those that choose to do this work, for those that dedicate their career to being in uniform specifically. But the threat to the officer doesn't end there. We've had a series of officers that were engaged in police action off duty, some compelled to do it, some initiating the police action on their own. But while the hazard may be a little reduced, it's still present for even off-duty officers. And really, kind of the theme of all this is you're never really off duty, particularly if somebody knows you're a police officer or suspects you're a police officer. That threat will remain.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about, that this isn't a regular 9 to 5, that you may be out of the precinct, you may be home, having dinner, but you could get a call at any moment where you are back on duty. It's not something that ever really stops. And I think that is a common misconception that people have, that, oh, once you clock out for the day. That's it. You're done. But you're never really done.
Completely true. And it's not so much getting a call to it. It's that there's a compelling reason generally in the hearts and minds of officers that if they see something criminal going on, particularly something that is going to put a member of the public in immediate risk. So many of our folks have been lost because they intervened in some kind of criminal act that they were witnessing. At least one of our officers was just turned out to be he was a targeted victim of crime and wound up losing his life trying to protect himself, defend himself and his girlfriend. Generally, it's an unknown to the officer in a case like that, and the other cases where the officers actively witnessed a criminal act and then intervened or involved themselves in this and then wound up giving their lives. And all of it was done to protect somebody, whether it was somebody known to them or persons unknown, and they're terrible cases. In my belief, they happen, particularly in our department, they've happened way too frequently.
It is a truly terrible thing to just think about the men and women all over the country that have lost their lives trying to do their job protecting someone else or trying to intervene in some sort of criminal activity. It's really terrible. It's devastating, and devastating not only for their family, but their brothers and sisters in the department that lost someone close to them.
Yes, and the impact, the old adage, time heals all wounds. For as much truth as there is to that, there's still plenty of it, particularly in cases where we lose an officer and the impact on the family. There's the immediate impact of the family, and then for those who have lost a loved one, and the suspect has been captured, there's the whole process of going through the judicial system, and in a number of cases that's just damn near a lifelong commitment. And I'll cite an example here in Los Angeles. They're just wrapped up a retrial of an officer that was killed 40 years ago. 3-month trial. Family was present for every moment of it. It's 40 years later, and you think justice has been served, particularly for somebody that was sentenced to death. And here we are 40 years later. In my case, it's been 36 years since my roommate was murdered. The family's still dealing with the fact that the parole hearings come up from time to time, and they've got to be bothered to provide the authorization for me to appear on their behalf. And there's depending on the nature of the case, particularly somebody that's sentenced to life or sentenced to receives a death sentence, there's all kinds of appellate processes. There's the original judicial process that takes years to wind its way through, and then it just seems like there's a fairly continuous picking of the scab of those that have survived these horrific incidences. So that's another one of those things that just doesn't get the attention that it probably should. The idea, oh well, this officer was lost so many years ago. No, this is a case where we're always going to remember. While the pain may subside, it never completely goes away.
Absolutely. And that I agree that that's not something that the average person really understands. They look at a case that happened so long ago and they think, well, that's it. It's done. The person was sentenced, the family got justice. But when they have to essentially be re-traumatized every few years, you're right, it never really goes away, because every few years they have to relive that trauma and the pain of losing their loved one again. And there's always the possibility that one day the appeal won't be denied or they'll be let out, and then they have to deal with that trauma.
Yeah, and that's a pretty significant concern, and accompanying that trauma is the concern for their own personal safety. Hey, we've kept this guy locked up for 40 or 40 plus years. Now he's out. I can tell you from very up close personal experience that the concern is, should somebody get released, are the survivors at risk? Is there going to be some form of attempted vindication for this person being in prison for whatever the number is, 30, 40, 50 years? It's not just the re-traumatization. There's another form of worry that emerges, and another form of concern that the surviving members of that family, or the surviving members of the officer killed in the line of duty, that concern surfaces for them, and it's as real as the day of the loss.
Absolutely. And I feel like I keep reiterating it, but it's something that people don't think about because they don't, if they've had the good fortune of not having to deal with it, they don't have to think about that. But someone like yourself that lives through things like that every day, you understand the long-term repercussions.
That's correct, and good for you for identifying. It's not something that's thought about because, in my experience, it hasn't been. And I am equally as pleased that folks don't have to deal with this. That they don't have to think about it. That's the good news is about the place in which we all live is so many people don't get exposed to having a friend or family member murdered, and everything that goes along with that. We are so fortunate for that. So I understand why not everybody understands, because you understand what you experience, or you try to understand what you experience, and experience is the great informer here in our lives. And I'm just very glad that so many folks don't have to worry about those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the silver lining in that they don't have to
Yeah,
worry.
absolutely.
So in our initial conversation, we spoke of off-duty officers and you that were killed, and you touched on it briefly, specifically Juan Diaz, Russell Kuster, Fernando Arroyos, Fred Early, and Tom Williams. Would you mind going over some of what happened with those particular officers and the impact that that's had on their fellow law enforcement officers?
Yeah, certainly. And this goes directly to the point that we talked about a few minutes ago about, never really being off duty when you're in the law enforcement profession. And when we initially thought about it, it came to mind because two of our most recent officers that suffered traumatic law enforcement deaths, they were off duty. That was Juan Diaz back in July of 2019, and Fernando Arroyos in I believe January of 2022. So two very recent events. And it's the summation of it is both of them were very unsuspecting. In the case of Officer Diaz, he had intervened with some graffiti vandals. He was out to visit a food truck, getting a late night snack or a late night dinner. Came across some folks painting up the walls, and I believe they were painting with some gang insignias in his own neighborhood, a place where he was born and raised, spent his entire life. Joined the department to serve his neighborhood and the neighborhoods that adjoin where it was that he grew up and spent his whole life. And when he intervened, unfortunately, he was shot and killed. When you leave the house, you go to look for something to eat late at night. I don't care who you are. You don't go out that door. You don't get in your car. You don't walk up to the food truck thinking that this is the last thing you're ever going to do in life. And sadly, that was the case with Officer Diaz. And not entirely dissimilar was the case with Fernando Arroyos. He was out with a girlfriend looking for a home to purchase, and if I remember right, they parked across the street from the location where the home was for sale. And just in the few feet they got away from their car, they were accosted. I believe it was, if the reports are correct, there was a robbery attempt. Somebody was trying to steal the gold necklace that Officer Arroyos was wearing. He sent his girlfriend off to safety, and then Officer Arroyos engaged with the suspects, and in the exchange of gunfire, Officer Arroyos was lost. So again, something as simple as, hey, let's go take a look at this house. You get in the car, and certainly I remember buying my first house. I'm sure he was absolutely positively thrilled. And then that goes not only bad, it turns deadly. Both horrible stories. And again, two young officers engaged in something that each and every one of us does on very frequent occasions, whether it's going to look for food, shopping for a house, checking out a neighborhood, whatever the case may be. These were two very, very well-intentioned, undeserving, and dedicated folks that we lost for no good reason.
That's horrific and just senseless that the manner in which they were killed, for them to just be going about their days doing just the average thing, looking at a house, buying some food, for them to have lost their lives is heartbreaking. And you really do feel for their loved ones, and you wonder why something so senseless could have happened, especially in the case of Juan Diaz. It was over graffiti. I understand it was gang related, but at the end of the day, you were painting a wall.
Right.
Like, why did it have to escalate to something like that? In the sense of the robbery with Fernando Arroyos, it's over a necklace. Like, you killed someone over a necklace.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. And it's horrible that they lost their lives, especially when they were trying to do good for their communities and good for the people that live in those communities. And it really is just, it's terrible, the risk that law enforcement takes 24 hours a day, whether they are in uniform or not in uniform.
Yeah, absolutely. And sadly, both of them were accompanied by their friends, which means they both witnessed the officers getting shot and killed. Absolutely, positively horrific for the folks that were subjected to this. In the case of Officer Arroyos, it's probably worth making a mention. The location he was looking at the home that they were looking at. I have no idea if they intended to buy it or not. I think they were just in the exploratory phase. If what's been reported to me is correct, they were just outside the city of Los Angeles, just into the county of LA. So the first responders were members of the sheriff's department who responded very appropriately. They gathered up the officer and rendered aid to him while trying to get him to the hospital in time for the medical personnel at the hospital to perform life-saving activities. So it was, I think it was an extremely smart and extremely risky and extremely daring undertaking by the sheriff's deputies that responded to that. They realized that the delay in trying to get fire department personnel there could be fatal, and they took matters into their own hands and did it all with the best of intentions. And for all they knew, the shooters could have followed him to the hospital. They took some risks themselves to try and save Officer Arroyo. So it's on the one hand, it shows just how deadly this business is. On the other hand, it shows just how much good can be done by folks wearing a badge.
Absolutely. And it's commendable that it's like they didn't really think about the potential consequences. They just acted in an effort to save his life. And it really shows that there are truly some wonderful, wonderful officers out there that would truly go above and beyond, no matter the risk, for anybody, regardless of whether it's a fellow officer or a civilian. And it's very heartwarming to hear.
Yeah, it's great to know we train to that kind of stuff, and 99.9999% of the department will never have to use it. But those folks recognize the importance of it. They followed their training. They did the best that they absolutely could for Officer Arroyos here, and it's refreshing from a professional standpoint, as well as from a humane standpoint, that there's folks out there that are willing to do this regardless of the situation. There's nothing that can be said for the risk that they took. For all they knew, they were gonna, the bad guys could have rolled up on them at the next stoplight and opened fire on those guys as well. So I recognize and appreciate the risk they took in order to try and save one of our officers.
And in regards to both of those murders, I believe there was arrests made in Fernando Arroyos's death, but were there any arrests made in Juan Diaz's?
There
Or
were,
there
yeah,
were.
there were. I believe there were four. They were made sometime after the incident. It's not like they took somebody into custody that night. If I remember, it was several weeks. So it was a significant investigative effort to identify those who were involved and to arrest them. And I believe the disposition of justice on that is still pending. And I believe on Arroyos, I think three have entered pleas, and I think there's a fourth one still pending adjudication here. But yeah, there were arrests made, and fortunately, there were arrests made in both of those cases, which is unlike another one that you asked me about that I'd like to take a moment and talk about, and that's Detective Russ Kuster. I worked in Hollywood 1983 through 1988, and I'm pretty sure he was in charge of all the homicide investigations during my time there. And that's typically, unfortunately, where I'd run across Detective Kuster as he'd be in charge of a homicide investigation at a scene somewhere in Hollywood. But he was a highly respected homicide investigator. That's a subspecialty within law enforcement that's done by actually very few people, even in the LAPD. And he was absolutely revered homicide detective and homicide supervisor. And another guy that certainly didn't suspect that his trip to a restaurant up towards the north end of Hollywood was going to be his last trip. That is, in fact, what happened when his evening was interrupted by a restaurant patron that was upset with the manager and left to come back waving a gun. The fellow folks in the restaurant there, and again, Officer Kuster in off duty in plain clothes, and if Russ was true to form, he was in a coat and tie. He got involved in trying to de-escalate the situation by trying to calm the guy down and talk him out of his handgun. And instead, again, there was an exchange of gunfire, and in this case, both Detective Kuster and his assailant wound up dead. So again, just one more instance. If you eat out one or two times a week, particularly when this case happens, it's one of those things that impacts all of us that knew about it. Was gosh, I can't even go to my nearby restaurant without some kind of risk being posed. And I think we've all probably been in, or many of us have been in restaurants where there's an unhappy patron for one reason or another, and now you're thinking about, hey, is this going to go as bad as things went in the Russ Kuster case or not? His actions, he shielded everybody else from injury. Nobody else got injured. Nobody else got shot. A homicide supervisor trying to enjoy some time away from the station that winds up shielding a whole restaurant full of folks from harm. A very unique part about this is that the homicide detectives that Russ was in charge of had to respond to the scene to handle the murder of their boss.
That's terrible. I can't even imagine being the officer that arrives on the scene to investigate, only to realize that they not only know the victim, but have worked with the victim and saw him every day, kind of thing. That must have been so hard for them to be a case to work. And I could only imagine how difficult it was trying to separate your emotions from the work that you needed to do.
Yeah, no doubt. But everybody that worked in Hollywood, anybody that worked in Hollywood and went to a murder scene, they were going to encounter Russ Kuster. And if you happen to work in the daytime, he was sitting with his homicide team back in the detective portion of the station. So he was well known. Anybody that worked in Hollywood in that era, in the Russ Kuster era, knew who Russ was. He was the supervisor of many high-profile murders you can imagine. Particularly with the passage of time since he was lost in 1990, all the high-profile murders that have happened in Hollywood. He's the guy that was in charge of all those, of all the investigations prior to his death. So very, very well known in not just the Hollywood ranks, but the LAPD ranks. And then the detectives that reported directly to him, it was a life-changing event. Yeah, it's difficult to describe what that would be like. Again, this was another nighttime hours case. What it was like for those guys to answer their phones at home and find out that they were responding to a restaurant where their boss had just been shot and killed. Hard to fathom what that experience was like.
It truly, truly is. Have there been any leads on his case?
Actually, in the exchange of gunfire, Ross and his assailant both died. So,
Oh.
if there is a silver lining to this one, it's the fact that there were no judicial proceedings and no appeals and no parole hearings. And
my mistake, my mistake. I think I was thinking of was it the Fred Early case is unsolved?
yes, yeah, and that's kind of a good lead in. Not all of them have the immediate dispositions, as did the case with Detective Kuster. Fred Early, to this day, again, he was an off-duty officer out on the west side of Los Angeles, and in the early morning hours I believe in September of 1972, he came across what he believed was a burglary in progress. And it being 1972, and him doing the thing that you've got to weigh as an off-duty officer. Is it better for me to intervene, or is it better for me just to be the best witness that I can? So with this commercial burglary essentially in progress, Officer Early went to a pay telephone to call the police department and get some resources out there, have some officers respond, maybe get a helicopter overhead, all the kind of things that run through your head. Essentially he was trying to be that good witness. Hey, I need to get that help out there. And while he was on the pay phone calling this into the department, he was confronted by the burglary suspects here. Unfortunately, it was a deadly outcome. He wound up being confronted by the suspects, and foot pursuit ensued, wherein Officer Early was shot by one of the suspects. Aid was rendered to Officer Early, taken to the hospital, spent a considerable period of the time in the hospital, ultimately was released, but perished from his wounds about 6 months after the incident. Again, this is the case of trying to do something right. I think it was 4 or 4:30 in the morning when he realized that there was a drugstore that was being burglarized, and he wanted to take some action on it. There is no legal reason, there is no binding reason for him to be involved. He could have just kept on his way. He could have driven to the station and said, hey, you might want to get somebody over to the drugstore because I think it's been broken into. He had a number of options, and he chose the option of doing the right thing. He went to a payphone. He tried to get police out there to arrest those involved in the burglary, and things just didn't work out. He made a conscious decision to go in foot pursuit, and our department of uniform patrol generally works 2 officers to a car, and one of the cardinal rules of our 2-officer operation is you never separate from your partner. In this case, he didn't have a partner. Going in foot pursuit by yourself is unwanted by policy here within the police department, and sometimes unwise, but still, Officer Early felt compelled, thought he was doing the right thing, and unfortunately paid for it with his life. Another very, very committed and dedicated officer that we lost, trying to keep his community safe and trying to do it while he wasn't on the clock.
It's so sad to know that he really was, as you said, just trying to do the right thing and in pursuing these burglars, and he lost his life. And it's even more sad to know that his case is still unsolved and his loved ones have never gotten justice.
And absolutely correct. And although it's unsolved, it's still a case. That case happened in the West Los Angeles area. Still have some very talented folks at our robbery homicide division that are assigned to this case, and they follow up on any kind of information that comes in. So it's although it's been a lot of years, 50 plus years here, I'm still trying to find some justice for the loss or the murder of Officer Early.
In the case of Tom Williams, what happened with that case?
Again, another off-duty thing, and particularly awful set of circumstances. None of these cases are pleasing. Every single one of them is absolutely awful. But there's an anniversary coming up here, about 8 days from now. The murder of Detective Tom Williams, Halloween of 1985. After work, Detective Williams is going to pick up his son at school. While he's in the process of picking up his son, he is shot. Something as simple and no doubt is pleasing. I know picking my kids up after a hard day at work was an absolute joy. And I can't imagine what that would have looked like. So at the time, Detective Williams was due to testify in a robbery case, and whether they laid in wait for him or followed him to his son's school, I don't recall at this point. But Detective Williams was going to pick up his son when gunfire erupted, and again, doing the right thing, Detective Williams shielded his son from the direction in which the gunfire was coming, and managed to save his son, but likewise was shot and killed in front of his little boy. Just another terrible occurrence here. And if I recall, 3 people were ultimately arrested, and I believe they all remained imprisoned here. It'll be 38 years here in a couple of days. So another one of those cases. And again, the thoughts going through your head, hey, this is what I got to do today. I come to work, I got to work on this case, I got to work on this case, and then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm done, and I'm going to go pick up my son at school. I'll look forward to doing his homework with him, or having dinner with him, whatever the case was that unfortunate evening, and not even having the most remote thought that you are going to get fired upon and shot and killed in front of your son. He got killed for concern over what it was that he was going to say in court during the solution of another case that had come across his desk. There's just there's no rhyme or reason to any of it. This one for me is particularly grievous and particularly heinous. Whether they followed him, they knew his son was there. If they laid in wait for him outside the school, how horrific can you be as a human being? Shoot and kill somebody's father right in front of their son.
Absolutely. I can't. It's like the audacity to take a man's life in general, but to take his life in front of his child, knowing that you've not only taken this child's father away, but you have sentenced this child to a lifetime of heartache because their father is gone, and their father was taken in such a horrific manner over a trial and something that he may or may not say, when at the end of the day, him testifying is just his job.
It is just his job. And here in Los Angeles, so many cases plead out. I don't want to say it's rare, but it's infrequent that you wind up in trial. At some point, the offender realizes that they're better off not facing trial. So whoever this was made a cognizant choice to take this to trial, to think that they, and nobody wants to deny them their civil rights, their constitutional rights, whatever it want to be. Everybody has the constitutional right to face their accusers, to elect a trial. But there's a cognizant choice here that had they chosen to plead out, Tom Williams would still be here with us. But somebody was so fearful of his testimony, they were so afraid of going to prison, they chose not to. They chose not to plead out. Not only did they choose not to plead out, either they conspired with, or their associates decided that the good thing to do was to eliminate the witness. The case was going to go on one way or the other. So it's just wrong-headed thinking. But these are cop killers that you're talking about. I don't expect them to think right. But there were just so many other ways that this could have turned out, where Detective Williams would have finished out his very meaningful career with the police department and enjoyed watching his son grow up and enjoying the spoils of being a parent. But people made some very lethal choices, and for me on the professional end, you don't hear much about the officers that you lose engaged in police action, although they're off duty. And this is one of those. This is kind of the headline case, and in my estimation, these kinds of things. Hey, the guy was picking his son up from school. We consider schools safe zones. We try and make them safe zones, and the only reason that the son was safe was because his father shielded him from the gunfire.
He truly died a hero. He truly did. He died saving his son, protecting his son, and it's a small consolation to know that he did that. He didn't die in vain. He saved the life of his son, which again, it's very heartbreaking to hear. It's heartbreaking to hear about all of these men that were killed, especially to know that they were killed just trying to live their life outside of the station. And it's an unfortunate reality that many officers have lost their lives just trying to do their day-to-day activities outside of work. In regards to that, before we finish this, tell me a little bit more about the Los Angeles Police Memorial Foundation and the work that it does to help the families of these fallen officers.
Yeah, the Los Angeles Police Memorial Foundation, we began in 1972, and our primary goal back then was to care for the surviving families of officers killed in the line of duty. And we've done that consistently and continuously since 1972. And how we do that is we take care of funeral expenses, and then after that, we continue our support. It's kind of a continuum of care. Following the loss, for the minor dependent children, we send holiday checks to the children until they qualify for our educational benefits, which we have a pretty substantial set aside for the college educations of surviving minor dependents of not just officers killed in the line of duty. Over time, we've expanded it to include active duty members of the police department. So the grant levels vary based on line of duty versus active duty, but we support all the folks that we lose in active service to the Los Angeles Police Department and the many and diverse communities that LAPD personnel serve. We've also got another category of for catastrophic injury or illness. Cancer has impacted the department pretty significantly here in recent years, and we're human beings and we're subject to that as well. The factors of causation don't really matter to us, but that's kind of our number one reason that we're losing active duty members of the department right now. So, and as you know, and I think everybody knows, many cancer cases linger, and in the cases where we've got department members that are suffering or enduring cancer, their time away from the department gets depleted, and they're at risk of losing their benefits. And we've got a grant category where we help with that catastrophic injury or illness. Probably the two main contributors. Certainly COVID was not kind to this police department. We had a lot of folks with lengthy hospital stays behind COVID that we assisted. With the recession or seeming recession of COVID here, it's kind of cancer and car crashes and cancer where our folks get injured and they're away from work for a period of time that creates a financial hardship for them, and we're able to help out with that as well. And then the final thing we do that we're very proud of, one of our directors is a recently retired dean from the Anderson School of Management at UCLA, and he oversees a merit-based scholarship program for college-bound seniors of LAPD personnel. So we've been from our humble beginnings of just trying to support the families of those very few that are killed in the line of duty. We've been able to expand our services and our reach within the police department. And we're fortunate to operate as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Very proud of the work that we've done over these 51 plus years to support the men and women that protect and serve the great city of LA.
That's amazing to hear. Just to know that these officers and their families are taken care of by the foundation is truly wonderful to hear, and to know that regardless of whether these officers have lost their lives or they are sick or they've been injured in some critical way, that their family members and their children are going to be taken care of, and that they're going to be okay regardless, because of the work that the foundation does. So that is truly amazing to hear.
Well, yeah, thank you. We're very pleased, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our website, lapmf.org, lapmf.org. And we're very fortunate to do what we do, and we're pretty unique in the ranks of all the law enforcement in the country by putting all these elements under one roof in order to better support the Los Angeles Police Department.
Absolutely. And that link will be down below so you guys can check out the website and all of the work that they do. I know I have listeners in California, so definitely check it out. I urge you to. Glynn, it has been absolutely wonderful having you on. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Courtney, it was wonderful talking to you. I know it's a tough subject, and it's tough on this end as well. So thank you for your time, and thank you for having me.
Oh, of course, of course. So as always, guys, you can check out the links down below for all of that good stuff. And Lisa will be back in the next one, I promise. But as she always likes to say, have a wonderful week, and we will see you guys next week for another chapter of the Book of the Dead. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this chapter of the Book of the Dead. And don't forget that you can always connect with us on Instagram. You can connect with us on Twitter, and you can absolutely connect with us on Patreon. We also have a merch store as well that we have frequent discount codes coming out for, so that you guys can get merch hand-drawn by myself at a better cost.
We hope you have a lovely rest of your week. And just remember, please be kind.
And don't forget to always stay safe, stay curious, and stay vigilant. Bye, guys.
Bye.